the just the bit on the left hand side is quite eye catching because it's a bit of a mass of ice there. I like the other shapes coming out there, and some in the background. I find that they are both giving depth to the scene, but also starting to interfere with the main subject. So I don't know if you could tone those down a bit. I like the fact that we've got a bit of detail in the background because, as I say, it does give depth to the picture, I think. This one I like very much. I just felt on this one, Bjorn, that you need to crop it down. That would be my suggestion to emphasize even more the building there. I think the fact that we've got the lights spreading out across the middle starts to become a little bit of a distraction. When I talked about minimalism, I talked about avoiding distractions and less is more. Again, I like the fact that we've got all this negative space around the building, but I think if you crop that down, put the building on a third on the, or a golden mean on a top vertical, I think would be a stronger result. This was the one that I like best from you, Bjorn. I think this has got a lovely flow to it. It works very well. It's a very harmonious picture. I like the way that the angle of the tree takes our eye to the bench. And when we get there, there's just this sort of teasing bits of trees, presumably tree tops in the background. And I think there's a possibility if you go into there and explore that area of getting another picture. Some people may prefer this flipped left to right, which gives an easier flow through the picture because that's the way we read, isn't it, left to right? So that tends to be a more natural flow. I actually quite like this one like this, but other people may prefer it flipped. But I thought this was a very nice picture, a very well composed picture, and works very well beyond. Yamela, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Intriguing image this because I think it asks questions of the viewer. We can start to make up stories about what's going on here, wonder what's happening, who is this person, what is he doing, and so on. I like the fact that he's got space to move into. That works quite well. Again, some people might prefer it flipped so that he's moving left to right rather than right to left. But I think that's very much a personal thing. So, but this works well. I like this as well. I think this is somebody who's looking for photographs, trying to see something different, and by and large succeeding. What I did find with this, because what I did with all of the photos was take them into Photoshop and have another look at them and see how I felt they could be improved. And this one, to me, Mella, I think is just a little bit too bright. If you just darken it down a bit, I think it brings out the textures in the ground so much more. But it's interesting that you're teasing us again here with this lovely diagonal from bottom left to top right, but we don't know where it goes to. So again, that's we can make up our own stories about that, but because we can't see that journey, I think it creates a bit of dynamic tension that works well. This one, I have to say, I'm very sorry, this is not so good. Technically, it's suffering. As you can see, I don't think you need me to tell you that. The highlights can't be recovered. There's no information in there. And whilst it's reliant on the shape, I don't think the shape comes through strongly enough because of the softness around it. I'm guessing it's some sort of shark, but I think we could have made more of the mouth and the teeth there to give us a bit more of a frightening result. This one I absolutely love. I think this is fantastic. This is minimalism. This is right up my street for minimalism anyway. Lots of negative space, but they just that space just emphasizes for me those two birds sitting there. They seem to be looking at something, we don't know what. So again, we can come up with a story about that if we want to. But the way that space works just to emphasize the two birds and make them the most important part of the scene, I think is excellent. So that's really good work. Pedro, Nice shape in this one, Pedro. It's interesting, lovely textures as well. So I think that works quite well. I don't think it's your strongest picture, which is probably obvious, as I've said that your strongest one will be last, but it probably just needs a little bit of sparkle to it to help bring out the textures a bit more. This one I found very interesting. I thought for a start it must have been taken in Palomares with that glow all around the tree and the birds. My apartment's in Palomares, by the way, so I like the place. Don't get me wrong about that. I like the way that you've cropped the picture to emphasize the height here. I think that works very well. I think there's another picture in here as well with further cropping with just the birds. If you take the bottom of the picture up to the dark line of cloud, then I think we can make a minimalist picture out of that as well. This one I like very much. I love this line coming through the center of the picture. I think that's very strong. And because it's the highest point of contrast, that's where we go to straight away. I find that quite often white vignettes like we've got here tend not to work very well, but this time I think we've added a certain mood to the photograph with it, and it does help to concentrate our attention down the middle on that very strong curvy line down the middle. And this one I love as well. I think this is excellent as another strong picture. I would suggest that you could actually crop this even more into more of a panoramic shape. There's a bit of twig or something, a bit of branch coming in from the right hand side, but I think because the rest of the picture is so strong, then that starts to be a little niggling point that just annoys slightly when you see it. So you can either crop that out by bringing the base of the picture up or take it out. But I find the shapes on this very strong. We'll always get told, and I will be telling people this later on as well, we shouldn't have twos in pictures because the eye bounces from one to the other. But here I think the shapes, the diagonal lines, the wake from the birds as they swim through the water joins them together and makes a nice cohesive photograph. Leslie. Now I know Leslie confessed that she had particular problems with this that I'm not going to repeat, but I think your set of three by and large work well, Leslie. There's one that I'm not so keen on, but this one I think works very well. The shape of the rose is interesting, and I think it looks much more complex than we probably realize when we just glance at roses. And I like the way that you've used the circles to take our eye round and round the picture and down into the center. This one I'm not so keen on, to be honest with you. I think your background could be, maybe should be a bit darker, but what I find is it just needs another little element in it to help it along. Maybe something like a wispy cloud just across a part of the moon, something like that, to add a bit of depth to it, to add a little bit of mood to it. I was going to say atmosphere, but the moon doesn't have any atmosphere apparently. Just that little bit of something to help, I think, add a bit of interest to keep our attention on the picture a bit longer. But this one I think is lovely. It's fabulous. I love the way that we've got this light surrounded by the dark. It almost invites us to dive in there, or perhaps the other thing, we can imagine something emerging out of there. The longer I look at this, the more I start to see the shape of a face in that light as well. So there's lots going on here that I think we can look at. I like the textures in it. There's a very tactile feel to the picture. So I think that's a strong result, Leslie. Well done. Goran, or is it Joran? Apologies for that. I'm intrigued by this one. I assume they're birds flying across, but they look like alien spaceships to me, which probably says more about me than it does about the photograph. But I like the way you've used the light on here, the reflection of the light on the water. And again, because of the cropping to the panoramic format, we've got great height to the picture, and the different elements of water birds, and then the light in the sky, I think add to that feeling of height. This one I'm intrigued by as well. It was interesting that you chose to show this as a vertical picture, I think, and I guess the reason for that is this bit of grass in the foreground. I'm not so keen on that part of the picture, to be honest with you. I do like the background very much. I like the different layers in that. I like the textures in that. And I like the light and shade that we got in that. It's almost one tone, but there's bits of light that's lifting it in various places and adding a little bit of shadow here and there, which I think helps enormously. So there's good bits to that one, I think. This one is one of those. This reminded me very much of a picture I saw on a judge I saw years ago who said, "Oh, this looks ugly," and gave it a very low mark. And I think something that provokes a strong response should do well in a photographic competition. I know this is a challenge and not a competition, but this one, my immediate reaction was, "Oh dear, I don't like the look of that." And I thought, well, that's a strong response, so that means it's a successful photograph. I wondered about whether you could have put this a bit more on a diagonal, just to help the flow rather than straight across the picture space, but I don't know about that because I don't know what space you had, but it's certainly one that provoked a response in me. And this one, I think, again, is a lovely picture, excellent work. I love I love the feel of the water. I could almost dip my hand in that. It's almost got a polished surface to it. I like the tactile feel of it, the nice soft textures on it, the little bits of reflection that are in there. And again, two ducks, as you can see, we should bounce from eye to eye, but there's a little bit of a diagonal going on. And here you can see the left to right movement that I think helps with this one to take your eye across from one duck to the other. Mijo, I do like your title picture. It's a shame it wasn't one of your four for the challenge, but there we go. This one, again, yes, lovely textures. I like the shape and the use of the light and shade here to emphasize the shape of the ring. For me, you've just put a little bit too much into the picture space, and I can imagine this cropping down a little bit tighter to fill the frame a bit more with the ring and the shadow. But very nice textures, good use of light and shade, and an interesting line in the wall above that ring just to the top right as well. And another one here, which is all about shapes. I wondered about this blank wall on the left-hand side and whether it had gone a bit too far. So when I took it into Photoshop, I found out there were some textures in there, despite the sun hitting it straight on. And I wondered if it's possible to bring those out. Maybe you didn't want them bringing out, and it's maybe me that's looking for that. As it is, I find that's pulling my eye down towards the bottom left-hand corner, whereas the contrast is pulling me back up to the top right to where the windows are. So there's a bit of a conflict going on between the two parts of the picture rather than being harmonious. But again, I do love the textures down the right-hand wall, the shapes that are coming out there, I think is very good. And this one as well is an intriguing one. I'm assuming this is the corner of a building. It doesn't quite come across like that, but I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a criticism. I think that works quite well. We've almost got a dividing line down the middle, and just for me, I just felt this probably needed everything just squaring up, so all the verticals were vertical and the horizontals were horizontal. And I know I made a comment about Beaker DePorter's work and how us amateurs are obsessed with verticals and so on, but because of that line down the middle, that strong straight line down the middle, I felt that it would be more harmonious if everything was in line with that. And this one I love. I think this is fabulous. I really do. This dynamic tension in here as the lines take the eyes up and down, in and out through the picture one way, left to right, right to left, keep making this journey around. The shadow helps to join it all together. And that street light, what on earth is that doing there? Well, for me, what it's doing there is absolutely making the picture. It's wonderful. I like people who put things on the edge of pictures and challenge viewers to look at, think about, wonder about their photographs, and you've certainly done that. So this is a great picture as far as I'm concerned. Janet, welcome, Janet. Interesting one to start with. There's a lot going on in this with the branches going different ways. I like the fact that we've just got one fruit there. I won't try and embarrass myself by guessing what it is. What I would suggest, though, is have a go, if you can, of turning this onto a diagonal. Diagonal lines tend to work much better and are much stronger in photographs than lines going straight across the photograph. And think about the rules of photography. They're there to be broken, I know, but something like the rule of thirds or the golden mean, and place your main subject, which is that piece of fruit, on that if you can, or around that area, makes for a stronger composition, I think. This one is intriguing as well because it asks questions, what's going on here, and the viewer can make up their own answers. I would just like on this, I think, a little bit more contrast, just to make that picture just pop a bit more, just to capture the viewer's attention a little bit more. You'll see some photographs later on where people have been very bold in terms of their composition, in terms of their contrast. And I think it's about us making a statement of photographers about what we saw, what we felt, rather than just what was there. This one is nice shaped tree. I like, again, the fact you've used this central line. I think that works well. And it gives us good irregular organic shapes. There's a lot of interest in there to keep us looking at it for quite a while, and nice clean background so that the shapes stand out. But this one was my favorite of this set, Janet, and I think this is really good. It's good seeing. I think this is something that's very much more personal to you. Most of us, perhaps, if we'd seen this, would have walked past it and not noticed at all that there was a photograph to be had there. My only suggestion, I think, is whether you can just darken that left-hand side a bit to help the material stand out that little bit more, just to give a little bit more contrast and a little bit more pizzazz to the picture. But this is very, very good. Janet, now I know Janet also said that she was out of her comfort zone with this challenge. Well, Janet, you wouldn't know that from looking at your pictures. I think you've got a good set here. I like this one very much indeed. I like where you've positioned this in the frame, because I've talked on other photographs about them reading them left to right, so flipping them. I don't think that would work if you did that with this picture, and the reason for that is I think that because we read left to right, our eye goes on a journey from the left past the trees, taking in the trees in the background, to this windmill type structure, so that we're going across to the focal point of the picture, whereas if it had been the other way around, we'd have been leaving the focal point behind as we went on the journey. And also because it's got the shape to it that looks like an arrow pointing to the left, so I think that brings the sails on it bring us round again, so the eye goes on a journey left to right to this windmill structure. We go around that and back to the beginning, so it all hangs together very nicely. This one, yes, it's certainly minimal, and there's interesting shapes in this as well. Good diagonals, as I say, are always strong in pictures. And I'm going to be a typical judge here, Janet, and ask for this one to be flipped. I do think this one works better, is a stronger result if we're reading this one left to right. very nice setting and very nice scene. I think for me, Janet, I would suggest that you need to be much bolder on this because it's all a little bit, to me, a little bit overall grey. And I think you need to be, I think, put much stronger about what you felt. This to me looks like a stormy day in presumably the lakes, wherever it is. It looks like it's a day full of atmosphere, full of weather, but the photograph doesn't convey that particularly strongly. So I would suggest think about darkening down that sky, having more contrast in the scene, and really making people feel as though this is a wet, stormy day. It looks like from the jetty there's water on that, so it looks like there was rain about anyway. So make people feel that they're about to get drenched. And again, think about flipping this one so the jetty's coming in from the left-hand side. But I think there's a lot of potential in this picture. This could be a very, very strong image. And this one I love, Janet. I think this works really well. Slight improvement, I think, would come out of it with a little bit more contrast, just making the snow whiter, a little bit whiter. You don't need to go too far with that, but I think then it just comes to life that little bit more. But I do like this very much, and I think this is an excellent idea. And again, very much a personal picture. I don't think it's a picture that many, if anybody else in the club, would have seen at the time had we all been there. So good work.
Thank you.
Kathy, yes, moon again. And I think if you're there, Leslie, perhaps you can see that this is a little bit stronger than yours because of the darker background. This one, I think, got a bit more interest because of the angle of the moon, and we can see more detail on the moon. What I would suggest, Kathy, is just making that moon a little bit lighter. I think it just needs to glow a bit more. A friend of mine once told me the moon is a grey object lit by white light, and I think we need a little bit more of the white light and a little bit less of the grey on it. So just a touch, you don't need very much, but I think that, again, that would just liven it up that little bit more. This one I like very much, and this was almost my favourite of the set, Kathy. I think the reason that it wasn't was perhaps because of this line in the background on the right that we can see that I find just takes the eye away from the flower that little bit. I did try, and I think you could try successfully cropping that out and turning this into a vertical picture. And also, I don't know what you use to process your pictures, but if it's Lightroom or Photoshop, there's a texture slider, so you can add texture into the petals by using that, which I think helps it a little bit as well. This one is my favorite of this set because I like the repetition of the shapes, the patterns that are in here. Again, I think you can bring the textures out a bit more. And again, I was a bit puzzled about what's gone on in the processing. I don't know where it's happened, whether it's something you've done, Janet, or whether it's just resizing the image or what it is. But it looks like there's a small image put into a black space, and we can see the edges of the small image. I don't mind the image being small. I think it quite suits it because a small image of a very large object that is actually quite small in reality is quite intriguing. There's a little bit more you can bring out in the shadows and in the background of this as well, which looks, when I looked at it, looks as though it's on a beach. So I think you can bring a little bit more of that out as well. But I think this is, again, a picture with quite a bit of potential, but just needs a little bit more work. But it's a good picture. It's a good picture, and it's worth doing. Peter, hello, Peter. Good to have you with us. Interesting.
Hello.
Interesting pictures again. I like this. I like the different layers in this and the textures that are there in the water and in the stones. I think works very well. I wondered again about whether it would work bit better, be a bit of a stronger result with a darker sky, which it possibly may be. If you darken the sky down, I think you need to darken the base of the picture a bit as well, just to hold the whole thing together. But it's interesting. I'd love seeing other people's work, because I would never dream of taking a picture like this. So that's to your credit, Peter. Well done.
Thank you.
This one.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. What could
I
say
changed the challenge a bit there.
Stay within the bounds of decency. Yes, there's some interesting textures on here. I don't think the lighting has helped you, because we've got all the light, as you can see, on the left-hand side, which attracts the attention there, although I'm not too sure that's what you're really focusing upon. But the textures, I think you need, if you can, to visit this at another time when the sun's at a different angle, to bring out the textures much more and the shapes. And I don't know whether there's rust or what's happened within the statue itself. As a dedicated black and white photographer, I'm wondering what colors are in there. I don't really want to be wondering about colors. I think it's about the lighting and bringing out the textures is the main thing.
Okay.
Leave it to other people to decide on the manhood question. This one I found intriguing as well. There's again some little bits that just pull my eye away from the main image, or what I see as the main image, which is this very strong arc of the lights taking the eye very quickly from one side of the picture to the other. I'm not too sure that we need the bit of structure right at the top of the photograph, and I think you could try cropping this down into a panoramic format, see what you think. For me, I think it would give a stronger feeling of the shape of the lights, rather than other bits attracting the eye and taking our attention away from the main subject. And this one I like very much indeed. Again, I think it's one where the sky needs a bit of attention, bit of work, because I find the clouds quite bright, and again, particularly right at the top, taking the eye away from the main subject. We've got a good subject there, well-trained horse. You got it to look at you instead of just eating grass, which is good. But again, I think it's one where we need the rest of the picture space, what we might call the negative space, to support the main subject. And really, I think it's in places fighting for attention. So I would suggest you look at darkening this down if you can, to place all the emphasis on the horse itself. But again, it's another one with potential that I think could be a very strong result.
Thank you.
Frank, I love your title picture, Frank. It's fabulous. It could have been your best picture. I'm sorry to say that. It could have been the best of the set, but I can't include it in the set, can I? So I love it. Right, okay. Yeah, moon again. And Frank, as we can see, has included extra elements along here. Does it work? Well, yes, I do. I think it works to a certain extent. I'm not sure whether you want me to look at the moon or the boat, and the moon seems, despite telling other people they need moons a bit brighter, this seems a bit too bright in terms of the lighting on the boat. And I know it's night time and there's no light on the boat. But again, I'm torn between those two elements in the picture space, Frank, to be honest with you. And I keep being attracted down to the ship and then back to the moon. So I'm not sure the cohesion in the picture is quite there, for me anyway. We all see things differently, and everybody is free to disagree totally with everything I'm saying. This one I like very much indeed. The thing I think that stopped it being my favorite of the set, apart from the picture that is favorite, is I think you've just included too much space here, Frank, for me, to be honest with you. We can see that there is no detail in the land, so I don't think we need as much there as we've got. and the same with the sky at the top. And what I would suggest is cropping this down so that the bottom of the picture is coming up to just show a little bit of the land there, cropping the top down to close to the moon, bringing the sides in, so we emphasize this diagonal line between this structure on the ground and the crescent moon, which I think if you fill the frame a bit more with those bits, then that diagonal line becomes much stronger, and there's a connection between the two that works very well indeed. This one, again, I find that my eyes being pulled towards the building in the bottom right-hand corner, obviously because of the lighting on that, how bright it is. I think that works very well, and there is I think a bit of a minimalist picture going on there with the shape of the building, the triangular shape next to the aerial. I think there's a picture to be had there itself. This left-hand side where we haven't got any light is, I think, to be honest, a not very exciting shape and not very exciting detail in it. All the action for me in this picture is happening towards that bottom right hand corner. If you remember when we had Tim Clinch with us, he spoke about what's the star of the picture, and for me the star of this picture is that triangular shape in the aerial towards the bottom right, which I like that bit very much indeed, and I don't know if it's one that you can go back and just capture that, but to me that's where the action is. This one though, Frank, I absolutely love. I think this is fabulous. Great deal of negative space again, but isn't it incredible how blank white space can add so much atmosphere to a photograph? This to me, I don't know where it is, don't know what's going on. I like the different layers in the land there with shapes in the hillsides and the mountains. This post on the left-hand side, that whether it's fog, cloud, smoke arising out of the valley, all sets up for me, in my mind, a First World War picture. The trenches, smoke arising out of the trenches, and bits of wire that's been torn down, and all that sort of thing going on. So other people will see different things, but I think that's the strength of the photograph, that we can all make up our own stories about that. So that's excellent work, Frank. Well done. Ashton. Yeah, it's interesting. I like to see the movement of clouds in the sky. I think for me, if you're doing long exposure photographs, that's much more interesting than turning water very milky. But and it works here. Again, this is one I'd suggest you think about flipping, because I see my eye going on a journey from the light cloud to the tree, excuse me, which is probably a bit more harmonious if we're doing it left to right. And the other thing I would suggest, Ashton, is seeing if you can just lighten that tree a little bit, because the tree is against some of the darker bits of cloud. But I just feel we need a little bit more contrast in that area to make the tree stand out a bit more. I'm intrigued as well by bottom right. There's a shape bottom right that looks like it might be an old boat or something. And once I notice that, I keep going back to that because it's in an area of high contrast within the picture. So I want to know what it is. I'm not bothered about it being there. I'm not going to suggest you take it out. I just want to know what it is, but that's me. This one as well, yes, certainly minimalism again in terms of the tones we've got in there. And I would say, if anything, Ashton, you've got a little bit too much of the branch, which might sound a strange thing to say, but I think again we can see there's the light on the branch and it's pulling the eye to that edge. And if we're going to put things on edges or near edges, then I think we need to make sure that we've done it deliberately and we're doing it for a purpose, and that it really needs to be there. Again, this is one that I can imagine cropped down to almost a square format to fill the frame with the flowers, and perhaps put the bit of branch on a little bit more of a diagonal, and I think the flowers will work with that as well. So yeah, it's good work going on. This one as well, I like this very much. And again, we could argue about flipping the picture. I'm not so worried about the flipping the picture on this one, although the boats are facing right to left. That doesn't bother me unduly. They've got a bit of space to move into, which is one of the standard rules of composition. I'd be interested to see a version where they're actually close to the edge and almost going out of the picture and seeing how that feels, because I think that would create more dynamic tension. As for this one, what the real suggestion I would make to you, Ashton, to think about is just making it a little bit lighter, because I think that just makes it a little bit more atmospheric. I find at the moment it's just a little bit too grey, and just a bit of more brightness around the highlights, I think, just emphasise the misty nature of the day a bit more. And this one is fabulous, Ashton. This is absolutely fabulous. What a great landscape this is. And I did flip this one as well, and I did find it seemed to flow better left to right rather than right to left. I love this path of light through the middle of the picture from the bottom right corner as we look at it now into the background hills and up the hillside. I think that works extremely well. I've not paid too much attention in all of these to the minimalism part of the challenge. They're all minimalist in terms of none of them's in colour, so we've got rid of the colour. The other things I talked about when I did my presentation was avoiding distractions, which people have done by and large, but less is more. And I think for minimalism, the less is more part is very important. And I would have to say, Ashton, no matter how much I like this picture, I don't think it quite meets the less is more part of minimalism. But who cares? I love the picture. It's a fabulous landscape. Well done. Rod, another one with an excellent title picture. I love that picture. That's fabulous. And this one's very interesting indeed. And another one, I think, where there needs to be, I would suggest, a bit of cropping. And I know, Rod, from having listened to you quite a few times doing critiques, that you often suggest cropping to other people. So I was interested to see your photographs and feel a little bit mean in saying to you, well, it needs cropping, Rod. It doesn't seem to be the right thing to be saying to you, but I think here that you could either crop out most of the beach to have this little oasis in the sky, or perhaps better still, crop out most of the sky to emphasize the beach, because the I think are very nice leading lines into the little community there. This one as well, again, we've got the crescent moon, which I think works very well. What I find with this one, again, we've got this dark landmass without any detail, but because we make this journey up, we're going to have to keep most of it as well. We could perhaps crop a little bit, but what I would suggest is just taking a little bit off the right-hand side. And the reason I say that is that we make this journey up the hillside under the moon, and as we continue, it almost feels like a bit of an anticlimax, because we're leaving the exciting bits, the interesting bits behind as the eye carries on. So I think this could be cropped on the right-hand side, or even cropped down to, well, not quite a square, but maybe a 5:4, 5:7 sort of format, so that we continue the journey, but we're coming to a stop around about soon after the crescent moon. This one, I love the lighting on this. It's fabulous use of lighting, really is. And I like the way we've still got a little bit of the background coming through. It doesn't interfere, though. It supports, I think, the main subject and adds a great deal of depth to the scene. I did actually try cropping this down to a square as well, which I felt worked very strongly, because we get the two outside grasses on the third and the middle one down the middle section as well, which I felt was a very strong crop to it. But it's your picture, Rod. Obviously, as you know, pictures are everybody's pictures, and you're entitled to do what you want with them. but my suggestion would be to think about that sort of severe crop on this one. And this one I think is lovely, great atmosphere, great feeling to it. And again, I think this works very, very well and can work cropped to different formats as well. I can imagine this as a nice panoramic format with quite a severe cropping of the sky and the beach, and having the horizon going straight across the center of the picture. But there's really good work going on here, and I like the fact we've got this depth to the scene with people in different positions, so there's interest throughout the picture space there. Dave? Now, Dave, I came to the conclusion that you like things in twos. And, whether that's true of all your photography, I don't know, but I was intrigued that you chose to position this, and quite obviously, quite deliberately chosen to position these like this, because I think a number of people would have gone for putting them on a diagonal. But, so I found this very, very interesting that you've done this, and this repetition is shaped. And again, my eye, because there's two, keeps bouncing from one to the other, but I think that's exactly what you want us to do. So the more I look at this, the more I become intrigued by it. It's very simple. It's certainly minimalist. There's no doubt about that. And I like it. I like it more and more the longer I look at it. So
it was a rubber grid in snow, and I could have 9, 6, whatever, and it just, so I took several, and that one I liked the best.
Yeah. Well done. I mean, it would be interesting to see a set of different numbers of these, because of the way I like to work in panels or sets of pictures. So it'd be interesting to see the sort of 9 becoming 2 and then going out to 9 again the other side in a set of 5 or 7 pictures or something like that. But it's an intriguing picture, Dave. Well done. This one, I find this very busy. Very, very busy, because there's all different lines going all over the place. We can see the verticals and horizontals. We've got diagonals coming in as well, the shape of the whole thing. And to have that all nicely squared up as you have done, I think works very well. And again, I think it's one that we can look at for a length of time. I'm just wondering though whether it needs one of Janet's boot prints on it, just to break up that regularity of the whole thing. I think when you get pattern pictures like this, if you've got something that just breaks up the pattern, it can emphasize the pattern even more. So another intriguing one. This one I don't think, to be honest with you, Dave, works quite so well as a 2. And what I think would have worked better with this is if there'd been a bit more separation in terms of height in the picture space of the plane, so we did get a diagonal coming in. You could turn this one a little bit to separate them in that respect and get a diagonal, but because they're both in line, I think it's just taken away the drama and the dynamic of the planes going through the sky, as well as their positioning in the picture space. And this one, I like very much. I think, if I may suggest to you, it still needs a little bit of work, because we've got this annoying line going through the picture, and I believe they're easy to remove these days in Photoshop, or I tend to use Photoshop, so I can only talk about Photoshop. There's a nice depth to it, because we're getting the stone wall behind the chimney, we're getting trees in the background, so there's giving depth to it. But for me, the action is all in the left half of the picture. We got the tree on the right. I don't think, to be honest with you, despite its nice shape, is adding an awful lot more to the scene. So I think you could even crop this down to a vertical picture if you wanted to, with the chimney and the tree, and then the trees in the background, the other side, still adding that depth to the scene. but it's lovely weather conditions to go out photographing, there's no doubt about it. Trevor, you haven't had to wait right to the very end, Trevor. So I don't know whether that's a good thing for you or not. But I was intrigued by this picture because I thought there's some very Rob Palmer type work going on here with the door and all the wires hanging around. And then, of course, the person tends to take over the scene as people do when they're in the picture. And I'm fascinated by her shoes, and I can't help thinking that if your wife was walking across the Peak District in those shoes, I'm not surprised that she did her ankle in, to be honest with you. But I don't know who she is. It's the shoes that intrigue me because they look very, very high, and the expression on the face, and I'm not too sure whether she's posing for you quite happily or whether she's about to smack you in the face. I can't quite decide between the two. But in terms of minimalism, I think, to be honest, I'd prefer if she wasn't there, because it's become a picture about her, in my eyes anyway, rather than about this intriguing piece of wiring above this door that leads to somewhere where we don't know where it is. So yeah, interesting one, Trevor. And this one, obviously, very much a Trevor picture. Similar comments to one about Janet's windmill type structure. I love this journey that we go along to the main focal point. Wonderful shaped tree, excellent conditions. I don't know if this is somewhere that you did on your project of getting out there in the winter to get your photographs that you're going to show us in a few weeks, Trevor. But all credit to you for going out in these conditions, because I think I would have looked out of the window and said, I can find something else to do other than walking out there. And again, you've done it up on the trig point, and you're not the only mad person out in this sort of weather, so I think that's good to see. But I like the depth that you've got out of this one, which the people help to provide as they emerge out of the mist. But this one is the one that fascinates me. I think it's beautiful shape, fantastic lighting. I don't know whether it's sculpted by the wind, what it is, whether there's something inside there that the snow's formed around, but it's really strong, very, 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 very good, lovely curves to it as well. The contrast is all suited. I'm not sure that we need as much above the object. I don't think we need as much at the top of the picture as you've given us here, but really that's being a bit nitpicking because the shape of this is so strong, so eye-catching. Lovely textures in there as well. Great work, Trevor, well done. Harry. Yes, very nice, Harry. That's certainly minimalism. Oh, sorry. And lovely shapes as well. We've got all the stripes. We've got lovely shapes there with the zebra's head down towards the ground. I think just gives it a lovely, lovely shape, as I keep saying. Lovely shapes and nice camera work as well, with the background being out of focus. Perhaps the right-hand edge is a little bit bright, maybe could be cropped a bit, but again, that's nitpicking really, because I think the strength is in the contrast because of the markings of the animal and the shape as well. And again, good shape on this one as well, and I like what we can see through the window there, and other shapes, intriguing shapes in there, and nicely cropped. Good work, Harry. I think this works very well as well. There's interest within the window, and there's interest around it in terms of the stonework and the textures there. This one I don't think is quite so strong as the last two. I think it's caught mid-steppers, added interest to it. We tend to look at birds, I think, more in profile, excuse me, so we can see the shape as we saw the shape of the zebra because of the profile. So with the head turned here, I think we get a nice bit of contrast on the head and within the body, but it's not, for me, such a strong shape. And this one just intrigued me. It's been a long time since you said this to me, Harry, and I'm touched that you've remembered. Um, I really like this. I like this very much indeed. And I think the reason I like it is because all that paint's run down this door. Why somebody would do it, where it is, all these sorts of things. I think we can make stories again out of it, and we can all come up probably with different stories. But the other thing that I think makes it is that sort of dot in the middle of the O on the U. So again, that's very eye-catching. I think it's very strong work, and I think it's something that not many of us would have seen the photographic potential in. So good work, Harry. Well done. Richard, I'm so pleased you've entered, Richard. It's good to see some work from you. This one I think is intriguing in terms of the minimalism aspect. I find this a very busy picture. We've got some very strong vertical lines in here, as you can see, and we've got all these textures in there as well. So lots to look at, lots to come out of that. And I don't know, it's, yeah, it works, but I don't think it's anywhere near as strong as your other picture, which is this one. I just fell in love with this one as soon as I saw it. I'm not sure we need quite everything on the right hand side, but it does give it a 3D feel. But I just love the fact that we've just got that knob on the drawer, that handle on the drawer, and we could almost set that in the middle of the picture if we wanted to. And I like the vertical lines. I like this contrast in this. I like the smoothness of the textures. You could almost feel that as you reach out and touch it. Lovely. One of my favourites, Richard.
Good.
Alan, good to see work from you, Alan. And again, I spoke not so long ago about putting things on the edge of photographs, and it's quite clear to me that you've done this deliberately. And the challenge, I think, for us as viewers is to work out why that should be so. I'm not too sure that I want to work out why it's so. I like that position that you put that church in, put the building in against a very, very strong sky. That I think the strength of that sky needs something else in the picture to emphasize it and just to hold it together. And you've done that. And I like the fact that we've got this split between land and sky that gives all the emphasis to the sky, and quite rightly so as well. I'm just wondering if in some areas, particularly above the tower, whether some of the highlights towards the top of the picture just need to be toned down just a little bit to try and emphasize the mood a bit more. Maybe maybe so, but again, I'm at the nitpicking stage when I'm talking about that. In terms of the monochrome nature of the photograph, I would suggest that you do just darken the base a little bit more. You may know this, but this used to be an old darkroom tip for all landscape photographers. Printing black and white in the darkroom was always to darken the base or even darken all the edges of the photograph just to hold the viewer's attention into it. And I think here the base of the picture certainly needs to be just a little bit darker than it is to give it a dark base to rest on. But well done for the positioning of the building in this. Now this one was going to be my favourite, Alan. And I think the thing that stopped it being my favourite, to be honest with you, is not the photograph at all, but the border. And I find, and there's other people doing similar things with borders, so I don't want to keep banging on about them. But to me, this border is so eye-catching because that's where the contrast is. You can see within the picture space itself, there's very little contrast to be had, and I like that. I like the fact that it's got this high key approach, that there's not really a black in there. I like that very much, but I think to put the very dark, this very contrasted border with so much white and such a strong dark line around it, really does take the attention away from the photograph itself. The photograph itself, I think, is wonderful. I really do. And I'd just like to see that without the border, because even now, and I've looked at this several times, as I'm looking at it, what I tend to see is the border and not the image in the middle. And that image in the middle is so good that it needs to be, and it can stand out on its own, I think. And this one was the one that I chose as the best of the one I like best of your set. And again, it's very much a different sort of approach to this subject. If I remember rightly, this is at Alula del Rio. Could be wrong, but that's what it reminds me of. And I don't know what you've done to it. I'm not bothered what you've done to it, because it's the result that counts. And that focus on the eye, I think, is the right thing to do. All this softness around it, it looks as though this is emerging from somewhere or other, or it's, for me, emerging into my nightmares. This is the sort of thing that I would expect to see in some sort of horror film coming out at you, and I think it's a very strong picture as a result, so well done. Gypsy, I love this title photograph as well, and again could have been the best one in the set for me if it wasn't the title photograph. I just love the fact that these stairs lead to who knows where, but all the contrast is at the bottom there, but there's enough light and shade throughout the rest of the picture to hold our attention. Whereas this one, it's difficult that it follows the previous one, because I like the previous one so much that I think this pales by comparison. And again, it's not offering me anyway enough to latch onto. I think it's quite a simple subject that we take in very quickly. Nice contrast with that little line of surf. Another one that maybe if you flip left to right, it reads a bit easier for most of us. But I can't help but feel after the last one, it's almost, quite honestly, Gypsy, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it's almost as though two different people have taken those two photographs. This one, intriguing, yeah, lovely shapes all over the place, strong lines, strong contrast that I think works very well. And again, one that I could look at for quite a long time, one that I can look at and think, should it be cropped down to just certain elements? Do we need this bit? Do we need that bit? But it's what you've chosen to show us. And I think it's very strong. And we've got a diagonal walkway through the picture from bottom left into the triangular shape going towards the top right, that I think works very well. This one I find a little bit more unsettling because we're walking up into a dark space. Maybe that's why it's unsettling, because we don't know what's there. Creates a little bit of dynamic tension, I think, because of that. And probably makes us a little bit reluctant to make that journey into that dark space, simply because we don't know what's there, things that go bump in the night and all that sort of thing. We're afraid of what we can't see, so that's a little bit unsettling, but it's provoking a response in me that makes me feel on edge. So that, as far as I'm concerned, makes this a successful photograph. And this one I like very much indeed, again, because we've got so few elements, very minimalist feel to it. And what we can see holds us down there. The building is placed, I'm sure, in that bottom corner quite deliberately to make us look down there. And what I do find as well is the shape of the tree is almost as though nature is turning itself away from the structures that people are putting in place there. So it's almost as though nature's saying, I don't like this, and don't like this building, don't like this development, so I'm going to turn my back on it. So lovely, very good, very, very good indeed. Gene, yes, again, a very busy photograph, I think, Gene. I like the idea of the street lights against all those windows there, and I think that works very well in terms of the graphic qualities of the shot. Not sure it quite suits the minimalism part of this because there's a lot going on there, particularly in the background. Very busy, but I do like the idea, and I think it's a good photographic seeing. So there's a good work, good thinking by you as a photographer in seeing and executing that shot. This one, yes, this certainly fits the minimalism brief, I think, much better. I do find, though, that this pole, which is obviously the main focal point of the picture, doesn't hold lasting interest. If you think, maybe what you should have done is get Harry to paint "I love you" down that post like he did on that door in his photograph. Something like that to hold the attention on the post, I think, would have helped enormously here. Maybe even if you just darkened it down a bit to provide a bit more contrast. I love the tonality of the background, though. I think that works very well. I do like that high key aspect to the landscape. And this one's very strong in terms of contrast, very strong in terms of the arrangement. Again, the two elements, but because the wind is blowing the flag is pointing towards the building, then I think we get this harmonious result out of it as well. And the building, very strong shape, very strong tonally for black and white. The sky works quite well because we've just got enough detail in there that I think makes it serve very well as a backdrop. And this one, I just love the mood in this, Gene. Again, similar comments are made to Alan about his photograph, but I think your border is actually working against the photograph because we've got such delicate tones in the photograph. Then to have strong contrast within the border itself, I think is not the best idea, to be honest with you. But I love the photograph. And again, I think it's one that could be flipped so that when we read it left to right, our journey will go along the sea to the person rather than leaving the person behind as we make the trip across the sea. But I love the tonality of this, really do. Java, welcome Java. Interesting start to your pictures with us. And again, I don't know, this for me is sort of almost saying welcome to hell. This is it. The sky is boiling up. There's lots of contrast. I think you could actually even put a bit more contrast in the sky to match that contrast in the trees. I like the contrast in the trees at the bottom, that light and dark that we've got there, and I think you could replicate that a little bit more in the sky. This one is lovely. It really is lovely. I'm just a little bit unsure about the top right corner with how much darkness we've got there because it seems to just unbalance the picture a little bit. But what I really like is this curve of the leaf as it comes round, and then there's a little bit of a tendril or something just curving out of that as well that we can see there. I don't know if it's possible to do that again and set that little very delicate bit against white wall rather than against the shadow, but very nice work indeed. And I'm intrigued by this. It looks like good processing, good cropping skills to get that door nicely square and just fit it all in the picture space. And that works very well. And I keep looking at different elements of the door and seeing different things, whether it's the letterbox or whether it's the key, the number, all those sorts of things. I think there's quite a lot to look at within the door. And again, it's such a simple subject, but contains so much visual information and intrigue for us. But this was the one. Again, I love this one, Java. I think this is excellent, works very well indeed. This is one where I thought, well, maybe it should come out of the post should come out of the left so that we've got a left to right diagonal. And I tried that and it made it much easier on the eye, but I found it took away the dynamic tension in the scene quite a lot. What I like about this is all that dynamic tension, because there's lines going all over the place, and they're coming in and they're going out at different angles and in different directions. And to me, the one little bit that makes the whole photograph and holds it all together is if we go up that post, and then out towards the top left-hand corner, we've got this little curl around of the wire, which brings the eye back down. So it makes our journey, turns our journey around and starts us going on a bit of a circular journey around the image, rather than just being pulled this way and that. So I love it. Eileen, sorry. Right. Yeah, this is one that intrigued me, and I was interested in the lines in this. I mean, nice shapes that the snow has brought out there, lovely textures. But what interested me was the lines, and to be honest with you, I find at the moment that the lines on the boarding past the chair take us out of the picture to the top left, and that feels a little bit unsettling. So again, it's one that I thought may work a bit better flipped left to right. This one again to me is all about the shapes, and I think it's a shell of some type, and I think they're very difficult to photograph because of the shapes, and to actually bring out how the shapes of the shells actually are. And I think it's one that you need to try different things, put it in different positions, and try and photograph it different ways, and maybe try and get some light or some shadow in there as well, and play about with the shapes. This one again, I think it's about the shapes. I actually saw yesterday a presentation by somebody who is a photographer for the Royal Horticultural Society here in the UK, and she got some absolutely fabulous dead flower pictures. And her work was all about having simple shapes that flow very well, and I think the potential is here for this, but we've got some overlapping, as you can see, which I think works against the simplicity of the image. And I think the other thing as well was having the contrast, that you got the contrast between the background and the flowers, and I think with a bit of a darker background, then this would be a stronger result. This one though, I love it. Lovely textures, lovely shapes. I love the specular highlights on the water as well, looking almost like diamonds. And you see, again, this is going to tell you more about me than the photograph, but this top shape in the snow and the rocks looks to me like a female shape, and it's almost as though somebody's bringing her jewels to decorate her body with there. And I like, again, the cropping down and the format that you've chosen to present to us, and just concentrating the attention exactly where you want us to look. Very, very good indeed. Angel, yeah, interesting shape. I like the shape of the lamp itself there, Angel, with almost this crown on top of it. What I think is not so comfortable is the bracket, which just comes out as a little bit of a black mass at the moment, rather than a specific shape to it. And I don't know if it's possible to photograph this either earlier or later in the day with a longer shadow that separates out the light itself from the bracket, and we can concentrate more attention on those lovely shapes within the light and the crown and so on. And again, I like the shape on this one. I like the contrast that you've got here. This setting light against dark works very well indeed, and provides us with a nice result. And this one, I think this was almost my favorite picture as well. It's the sort of thing that I'd like to take. Interesting angle that you've got on it that I think gives us some depth to the scene, that we go in through the window and into the dark there. And I like the fact that we've got this sort of almost horizontal line at the bottom of the window, and then irregular shape to the rest of it, which is the sort of thing that intrigues me about the windows that you can find in the villages in Spain as well. Lovely textures on this as well. And this one is, I could look at this for a long time. I really could, because it's just so good, so unusual. There's different bits I keep seeing to this. It's all about textures. To me, but I like circular shapes anyway, but within the circles we've got other little bits of things that seem to be falling apart, and things that seem to me to be highly dangerous to touch. So, and I apologize if this is in your house, Angel, but it's something that I think it gives an old world feel. It gives a feel of having some age to it. And I think the treatment that you've given it emphasizes that as well. So very, very intriguing picture. Thank you. Right, I don't know who this chap is, but if only he'd put this picture in as one of his 4, he'd have had a good picture. As for the rest, well, let's have a look. Very much an Emilio picture, and I do like this. I like the simplicity of it. I like the minimalism aspect of it, in terms of the tonality, in terms of some of the shapes. I think it starts to get a little bit busy on the right hand side. That's not a criticism. I think that's more just an observation, because there's some lovely shapes coming in there. And in some ways this, and I know Emilio's got others of these, they remind me almost of some Oriental art. And it's just that concentration on natural shapes and forms, which I think are very intriguing. And it's interesting to see that Emilio has obviously got a toy dragonfly that you can take around and stick on pieces of grass somewhere. Now I know it's a real one, and that he has great skill in photographing the dragonflies. And I have to admit, Emilio, that when I was going through the photographs the first time and this came up, I burst out laughing. I laughed out loud at this photograph, not because it's funny, not because it's, not because I wanted to laugh at it in a derogatory way, but this is such a Rob Palmer picture that you've out Rob Palmer with a picture here, Emilio.
Totally.
I remember on Facebook, I think we used to call this mono-robbing, didn't we? But anyway, I mean, I love all this circle of wires and such like going around. What I would suggest to you, though, which I was talking about with Angel's window picture, is that I think it needs one part of the window to be either on the horizontal, straight on the horizontal, or the vertical, to emphasize the fact that the window isn't square, that it isn't all horizontal and verticals that you might expect in a building. Here it looks just all a little bit off the straight lines, that it looks as though it might have been your fault for doing that rather than just the way the window was made. And yes, it's that good that I'm having to be very nitpicking about your photograph. This one again, another one of your reads. Here I talked earlier about a bird photograph and showing the profile, and we can see here how profiles of birds work better. I find this one to be very, very busy as well. Lots going on here, lots to look at. It would be intriguing to see a panel of pictures from you of these type of things. I've spoken about the borders on others, and again, I'm not sure this is entirely sympathetic, but because the tones in the border match the tones in the photograph, I think it works a little bit better than we've seen on others. But this is my favourite, Emilio, of your set. I love the shapes in this. I love the curves, the circles, the dragonfly in just the right position, the tonality of it, everything I think is working well. And this for me is top class work. Excellent, well done. And Howard, we'll have to be gentle with Howard as he's newly arrived with us. As you may know, I'm a good, well, Howard is a good friend of mine. I don't know whether I'm a good friend of his, but he's a good friend of mine. And I admire his photography. I'm intrigued by his photography because Howard always sees and photographs things that I wouldn't even think of pointing my camera. And here's one. We can see these, there's almost rectangular blocks throughout this photograph, different shades of grey. This reminiscent for me of brutalist architecture. And it's a very strong image, and I keep wondering, does it need something extra in there just to soften those lines, those strong lines down, or just as a counterpoint to them? And that's the sort of thing that I think Howard's photography does. It challenges the viewer. And it seems to me with Howard's photographs, and this one in particular, that he's very confident about his own vision and is quite willing to present that vision to everybody else and basically say to those people, this is mine, make of it what you want. And I think that's a challenge for us because we can see, I think, that this is a unique vision. I'm not sure how many of us, if any of us, would have even taken a photograph. I know I certainly wouldn't have taken a photograph of this. There's a chance I was with him when he took it, and I certainly didn't take a photograph of it. And I would be looking for other elements to put in there. So it's intriguing that we get these really different shades of grey and these blocks of grey that we have to think about. Similar one here, we've got different shapes here. This also reminded me of putting bits of Lego together. It's almost as though we're trying to fit that top structure into the shapes beneath it. And it is all about shapes. We're getting diagonals in here, we're getting horizontals, we're getting verticals. And it's about fitting those shapes together. And it's very much a Howard Dixon picture, I think, in terms of the shape, the tonality of the photograph. This one I find a little bit easier to cope with, which tends to come as a bit of relief after the last two. I'll talk about that, because it's interesting that we're using almost vertical lines here to take the eye across the picture, but because we've got this contrast with this figure behind, it feels a little bit easier for us to cope with. And I'm not so sure that makes it quite as successful as the others. It certainly makes it different, and it's again very much a Howard picture. I like the fact we've got this contrast here, and I like the fact that the background figure is thrown out of focus, so that's another way in which it contrasts with the foreground. And we've got this darkening down around the edges. I talked about that earlier. We can see there's almost a vignette being applied around the edges to concentrate the viewer's attention exactly where Howard wants it. But this is my absolute favorite. And what I did with these as well, I did something a little bit different, I'm afraid, Howard, with yours than I did everybody else's, and that I looked at them as thumbnails. And this as a thumbnail stood out even at that small size. It's just so strong. And for me, though, it's got that extra element of something that breaks up the rectangular blocks, something that breaks up the straight lines, because we've got this wire, we've got this bit of curtain, so there's different shapes in there. We've got the shadow as well, which sort of softens it down, but all of those things together, I think, emphasize the strength of the rectangular shapes within the picture. And really is an excellent picture. And I think that's the last one. Indeed it is. So I can come out of that, stop sharing, and say, well done, everybody. I think there's, hopefully now you can see why I was so excited about the pictures when I first went through them. What I've done, because there's so many, I haven't picked out any yet to say these are the ones that I think work the best out of those. What I'm going to do, with your indulgence, is put the best one from each person up on Facebook. So we've got all 25 there, and I'm going to pick my top 10 out of that. So keep watching the Facebook pages. Thank you everybody for entering. It's great. It was good to see so many entries, and good work by everybody. Yeah, well done.
Thank you very much, Rob.
I don't need a drink now.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Very, very good critique. Very gentle, but very, very, very powerful.
Yes, well done, Rob.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing those, the choice on Facebook. Yeah.
I have a question. Couldn't you also place these photos on the website? Because some of us are not on the Facebook, please.
Yes, of
Yes,
course.
yes, no problem.
I'll
Well,
think
Thank
about
you.
that.
Done a